All right. So this webinar has been actually a lot of fun to put together because I got the opportunity to do a lot of research into WordPress and just look at what's changing in the overall community. And that's something you don't get to do very often just because you're in the day-to-day grind of things. So it's been a lot of fun for me. So I'm hoping that what I have found for you is something that you can take on with you. I think long story short, we're essentially living in the Wild West where everyone is attempting to stake their claim in the future of technology. And just like Western expansion, there's going to be some winners, there's going to be some losers. So we just have to be mindful on who we take our wagon to so we go in the right direction, right? So for this webinar, to keep things simple, I've broken down everything into some sections that should help you understand what's happening right now, what you need to do to prepare for 2026 in the last few months of this year, and then where everything is likely going in 2026. And before I jump in, I want to express one assumption that I've made as part of this overall webinar, and that's just that I'm assuming that if you are attending this webinar, you've got some experience working with WordPress. Going to be a few things that I talk about here and there that you're not going to really understand unless you've actually worked within the WordPress dashboard. So let's jump right in. All right. So it makes sense to just jump and talk about the platform itself and point out what are the biggest things that are happening recently in 2025 and where they might be going. So quite possibly the biggest element of WordPress that developers have been focusing on is the Gutenberg editor. This is the tool that originally came out in December of 2018, and it spurred a whole new way of thinking about how content in WordPress is maintained. Some people loved it, many people hated it, but what's undeniable is how the tool has grown over the years. And if you fast forward to 2025, you're going to find that the developers of WordPress have been focusing on two really big things with the tool. First, they're diving even further into block development, such as like adding new blocks or making the existing ones work much better. Also worked on like adding accessibility tools or some design features, just a lot of things that they're doing to just make the various blocks work much easier and better overall to maintain your content. The second thing that they've been working on is improving the way teams can work on content on the site. So the WordPress developers have been working on something that has been coined a collaboration experience. But if you look at the overall WordPress community, most people are calling it, hey, it's a Google Doc style of collaboration. So basically, the goal of this feature is just to allow like multiple users to all work on the same page or the same post at the same time, and then also see what others are doing at the same time. It's all in real time. It's all great for teams. And I think this feature that's they're working on that they've been releasing out with some recent updates, if you have a large team, this could be a huge game changer because you could have multiple people working on all at the same time. But if you're kind of a small one person marketing team, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But it's something that is unique to Gutenberg that is coming out that others just haven't been really focusing on. And with those two types of features, I'm beginning to wonder what the future of the editor might play in our day-to-day sort of marketing life, right? With all of these new advances that Gutenberg has been providing. If you happen to be one of the persons on your team that keeps an eye on all of the new core releases for WordPress, you've probably likely noticed that the updates have slowed down recently in comparison to previous years because there's just been a shift towards stability. And Press has been extremely deliberate, I think is the best way to say it. With the releases in previous years, it always seemed like there was a new release every month, right? And that sort of cadence, there was just constant things changing, and a lot of things seemed to break along the way. It almost felt like we were assembling the plane as we were flying type of thing. And it was kind of rough on digital marketing teams and vendors and stuff to just make sure you're getting the most out of WordPress. But the shift now has been more towards a quality over velocity is the term they're coining. It's a mentality. It's just quality over velocity. So that means in 2025, we've only seen one major release with 6.8 in April. And then there have been two other releases in July and September of this year that have come out with press. And there's several reasons for this cadence, one of which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But I think the key takeaway is to consider that a lot is happening to the core. And what's happening seems to be this realignment of priorities within WordPress itself, which is really interesting. And one of the maybe lesser exciting sort of things that has been happening to WordPress is a deeper focus on security. I guess if you're in IT, that's fun. But if you're a digital marketer, you're just like, oh, security, really? Okay, well, that's fine. It's not cool. It's not a cool bell or whistle, but hey, but it's something we all have to really pay attention to. The way I'm looking at security with all of the changes that are happening with, it's almost like you're a homeowner and you know you need to get new windows. You just don't want to spend the time and the money on it, but you know it's going to be good for you and it's good for your house. So you end up doing it, but you just don't have any fun doing it. For WordPress, I'm getting that kind of vibe. It's all about making the platform just more efficient, less vulnerable, and it's just this mentality that they're doing to really beef up the security behind the platform. And truly, the key takeaway to note with security is that it's becoming extremely important for WordPress because of some figures I'm going to show you very soon. And WordPress is doing its part to just clean up its technical debt to establish themselves moving forward to make it better. All right, performance. Another interesting but probably not too exciting update on WordPress is how they're developing improvements using something that's called sustainable development, which essentially means that they're working with bigger teams to develop improvements to the overall core platform. And if you look at the facts and figures from some of the more recent releases that have come out, you'll note that there's been considerably larger teams. And these teams are making all of the updates. And it makes sense, right? Because there's just so much change going on with the internet. It's the Wild West, right? We're trying to wrap our heads around everything and figure this out. The larger the development team that you have, the better you can divide and conquer and make improvements that just align with all of the changes that are happening. And quite honestly, the key takeaway from this expansion of the teams on who contributes to the build is leading many to believe that WordPress is attempting to position itself as an enterprise level content management system. I'm not going to get too far into that today, but it's something to look into. And if you're not familiar with that term, an enterprise level content management system is something that we use in the industry to just describe different levels of capabilities that a platform might provide. And an enterprise system means it can handle like the big websites, it can handle tons of data, and it just does it with ease. So WordPress is really working on doing that. So between the improved content editor and the security and the sustainable development, WordPress is just utilizing all of these items to create something that could be bigger and better and serve bigger players in the market and take even more market share, which is really interesting. So the last thing I want to talk about with WordPress is the elephant in the room. If any of you have been keeping track of just WordPress in general, and that is the courtroom drama that essentially started off about a year ago, maybe a little longer than that, and it's carried all the way through to today. And what I'm referring to is just a legal battle between Matt Mullenweg. He's the guy who founded and leads Automattic, who manages WordPress. And he is going up against WP Engine, which is one of the largest hosting providers for WordPress. They're usually the largest. So the way it started off with just some public criticisms from Mullenweg on X. And the things said weren't like that great. And it eventually escalated into lawsuits. And I think at its core, the fight is all about protecting the WordPress brand from Matt Mullenweg's perspective versus what WP Engine is saying that they're arguing that no, he's bullying us and practicing unfair tactics to take over our products. And so there's just this back and forth that's really interesting. So I would say pop some popcorn when you see the trial begin because it's going to be an interesting thing. But if I were to boil it down into like simple terms, Automattic says WP Engine is misleading customers by pretending to be official WordPress while profiting off of the platform without giving enough back to the free and open source community. That's kind of a key thing. And then WP Engine is on the other side saying, like, listen, Automattic is using its control over WordPress to demand money from us and punish potential competitors, which goes against the whole purpose of the ecosystem. So there's this huge fight going on. And this whole trial is literally just getting started and it's creating a rift. Maybe that's too strong of a word. It's creating a discussion within the open source community on just a number of interesting things. Most notably are the things that are on the screen. If you think about it, WordPress has always been free and has allowed anyone to use the source code to create their own plugins and themes. And this has been, I would say, WordPress's strength because of this massive worldwide community that grew from this potential, right? But now Mullenweg is questioning if an organization can take that liberty too far and profit from it without giving enough back. So that's kind of the interesting thing there. So this whole trial, the court could decide what is an appropriate use of WordPress before an entity must give something back, I guess, to the community. The court is going to dive into like this existential purpose of open source and how one can profit from it. And it's going to be this very interesting discussion that could drive the direction of WordPress along with other open source platforms out there. So that's something definitely worth keeping an eye on. So that's WordPress, the core, the platform itself. Let's talk about what's happening with from a pretty high level here. Over the past few years, one of the biggest changes affecting plugins is how their user interfaces have become amazingly simple to use. On the day, one practically had to be a developer to truly understand how to set up and manage a plugin, and those days are really long gone. The focus on today's plugins are all about simplicity. The user interface for all of these tools have just undergone this massive renaissance of sorts, where a first-time user or a long-time grizzled veteran can crank through the settings and functionality within the plugin without even barely have to think. And I'm sure you've all experienced these new features after you've installed a plugin or when you've run an update to a plugin and didn't really even think about it when you were doing it. And that is something that probably the most noticeable way of experiencing this is like an onboarding tool, like, hey, check out these new updates we have, where essentially you get these little pop-ups that walk you through the various components of the plugin for the first time after a new update or for when you first download the plugin. So that's a big push on the plugin side of things that they are really pushing to just encourage users to really get to know how to use their features and things like that. And the key takeaway from all of this is it's just going to start getting easier and easier and easier as the days go by. So let's talk about security. My uncle once told me, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's certainly poignant for the WordPress ecosystem. You can't own the largest market share and not have a few headaches from people who have nothing better to do than just watch the world burn. It's frustrating. And there are several organizations within the WordPress ecosystems that serve as like the watchful protectors for WordPress, if I could think of a better term, I don't know. But basically, that's what they are. They're keeping an eye on things. And one of these organizations is called PatchStack. Earlier this year, they released a report on WordPress security vulnerabilities, and the numbers are kind of eye opening. And you can see them on the screen here. According to the report, close to 8,000 new security vulnerabilities were found in the WordPress ecosystem just in 2024, which translates to, I believe the number was about 22 new vulnerabilities were found per day. But the craziest thing about this, the craziest stat is 96% of the vulnerabilities were within plugins. And then you can see like themes and the WordPress core itself really didn't amount to much within the vulnerabilities. But of the vulnerabilities that were found, the statistic was that 43% of them did not require any authentication from the administrative user to that site to be exploited. So what that means is that the hacker did not need to spend hours and hours attempting to break in and steal someone's credentials and then log in and insert the code. They were just given access by the user and by the administrator. The focus of these these nefarious people has shifted to creating scams that get a user to click on a link that downloads code on their computer, and then it gives the hacker all the access they need to do the harm that they want to do to a WordPress plugin. And this is a really high level description of what's happening. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. But what's important to understand is this is becoming a massive, massive issue. And if you have a few moments, I would highly recommend going to the patch stack report and just reading it. Some things might not make any sense. It gets pretty technical in spots. Others are clear as day. I think the key takeaway from all of this is this data. You should plan just on being smarter with your credentials. The data is just pointing you in that direction. As annoying as it is, apply multi-factor authentication, do all the miscellaneous things you need to do to just protect your login as well as your website in general. The other big thing that I would say that is really making a lot of changes is how plugins are being marketed. So a few short years ago, everything was marketed as being smart. And what that meant was that the plugin relied on data to function. It could pull data and use that to create things. Well, the term smart is no longer a thing. And now everything is AI. And we're experiencing a complete change in how these businesses and developers define their tools. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of the things that now promote AI are just repackaged tools that did the same thing that they did before. And it's if you're not paying attention, it's like, oh wow, this has AI. And what's kind of bad about it too is like many of these tools now come with a premium cost because hey, we're using AI. But the reality is it's no different than what they were offering previously. They just changed how they promoted it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some tools that do have interesting AI capability. I'm not saying that there aren't, but a lot of those seem to be related around like content or SEO or chatbots and things like that. And oftentimes those tools are that actually have AI running behind them are generally limited in the scope of what they can actually accomplish. So the key takeaway to understand is that AI right now is all the rage and it's getting bigger. And before you jump into any sort of tool, or because it's like, whoa, it's AI driven, really do your due diligence just to make sure that you're actually getting what you're paying for. That's the important thing to really keep in mind. Okay, so we've been covering all the things that have been happening in WordPress with an eye as to why they're happening. So before we can get to what might be happening, let's get into how do you prepare yourself to be ready for 2026 and really meeting it head on. So some of the things that I talked about earlier were just statistics, how plugins are really the primary cause of security issues. And that's got to, I'm hoping that that came across as a major warning that first and foremost, you need to be just hyper vigilant with your security. And fortunately, there's several things that you can do immediately to really protect yourself in 2025 and going into 2026. So the first thing is to find a host. Number one, find a host and a plugin that can conduct automated vulnerability scanning. That's key. Automated vulnerability scanning. There's a ton of tools out there. Some are quite extensive and advanced. Some are really basic. Read through the documentation and stuff like that. See if it fits your needs. The important thing is to cover yourself both at the hosting level and the WordPress level to make sure that you are getting automated vulnerability scanning. Review the host, determine if they have anything like this. If they don't promote any type of automated scanning, move. Get off of the host that you're on. Move over to something like Kinsta or WP Engine that have just active security tools in place, and it's just part of what they offer in that respect. If you're looking for plugins, the ones that do a lot of automated vulnerability scanning are things like WordFence and Security. Those are some tools that you can use to provide that ongoing scanning of your site. And while you're going through all of the effort of adding tools to protect yourself to do that preliminary scanning, you should also apply yourself to checking in on your WordPress environment by conducting a technical audit. And this is something you should do at least annually, and I would say more importantly, maybe quarterly. I know that's hard. It's like you've got so many other things to worry about. Like, do you really need to worry if the doors and the windows are all locked? That type of thing. It's not that much fun. But I'll say this, I've seen a jump in security issues with businesses that have come to us to help them clean it up. It's been a noticeable jump in the past year. And what I would recommend, or what I would say is, like, if you're not actively auditing your website security, you're going to be actively working on crisis management plans to keep your brand's trust if your website gets hacked. That's something that's really important. One of the simplest protective measures you can take to keep your site safe is just do the multi-factor authentication. Like I said, I hate doing this stuff. I have to get a text or yeah, I get it. It stinks, but this is something that should just be table stakes now for how you actually log into your platforms and protect yourself overall. So while you're conducting that quarterly audit that I was mentioning with your security, you should also be auditing your technology stack. So I mentioned earlier how WordPress is the core itself is going through a cleansing to remove all that legacy code that's bogging it down, its performance and all those things. WordPress and Automattic is spending hundreds of hours to make WordPress this well-oiled machine, which is great. You should be doing the same. That's the long story short of this. To have a successful website in 2026 and more importantly beyond, you need to understand that speed, security, and stability are the ideals you need to strive forward in the future. And the fastest and easiest way to get that to that ideal state is to clean up your plugins. It's always the biggest issue with the sites that we get to. Just spend time assessing your plugins, clean out the stuff you don't need, find better alternatives that might be more secure or have better functionality. Be nimble, be efficient, just clean all that stuff because with your setup, if you apply those changes into it and WordPress is doing its part, you're going to have a much faster and much more secure platform or website that you can then get into 2026 and beyond without having to worry about some of the big things that are really going to be coming down soon. And while you're doing all the plugin cleanup, also consider hosts in 2026. And experience has taught me that hosting providers really fall into two camps. And I'm going to break it down a little bit. So the first camp is made up of lower cost hosts that essentially provide server space for your website. They might not be as active in updating their servers, or they might not offer backups that you can make, or they're not doing the scans for your websites for security purposes. You can get that type of stuff, but you got to pay extra to get it. Now, this type of host arrangement can be okay for some. If it's just a very simple website, maybe it's just your family blog or something that you just like to do as a hobby. To me, that's fine. It's simple. It doesn't need to have this massive, crazy environment for security because it's just a blog. But there's a second camp of hosts that provide just a solid set of services for businesses. And this is what is extremely important. These hosts provide the ongoing security scans. They provide plugin security reports. They offer 24/7 support. They offer content delivery networks or CDNs. They provide virtual machines with real AI testing and things like that. It's this proactivity that is coming out of these hosts that are providing that, that is, from my perspective, the type of host that all businesses and all nonprofit organizations should be going towards because it's protecting you. And I can say that because I've been working with just dozens and dozens of hosts over the years. And what I found is if like you're spending less than $20 a month for hosting, you're basically going to run into problems. And that's going to only grow in 2026 and beyond because there's just too many changes that are happening related to security and the volume of data that's coming with AI to just leave your website on a provider that just doesn't take hosting seriously. So that's a really important thing to consider as part of your prep for 2026. If you're thinking about a redesign in 2026, or even just a small refresh, some considerations you should make. Number one, you want to design an accessible website. And it's a no longer nice to have sort of thing. You must design towards making your website accessible for everyone. And accessible websites just incorporate a number of best practices that allow users to just engage with your website regardless of their abilities. And that's really key. And one of the quickest wins you can do, and it doesn't require a ton of development time or stuff like that, is just you can reassess your color palette and the fonts on your website. And building a color palette that serves up content with enough contrast. So it's so easy these days. And with there's tons of tools out there that are available for free or for a small payment. So there really shouldn't be anything in the way for you to take the step forward to be able to just make sure that your website is accessible in that frame of mind from a color contrast perspective. There are other things you need to do, and a lot of those require someone with a little bit more advanced understanding on it, but that's something that you should really consider. There's a lot of best practices you should also apply, and the good news about that is they also improve SEO. So what I mean by that is just maybe making sure that you're properly tagging your site with heading tags. So you've got tags properly headed, you've got images that are labeled properly, things like that. There's a lot that can be done. We've got blogs, we've got webinars that focus on this stuff. So I'm covering this at a very high level. The important thing to just ask yourself is like, would you actively do something in your marketing plan that would prevent anywhere from like 20 to 30% of your potential prospects from engaging with your business? Of course not. Something you really need to start considering. And the last thing I want to talk about is something that is, if you haven't implemented it yet, you better do it really soon. And that is a consent management platform, or what a lot of people are calling like a cookie consent. More states are passing laws related to privacy, and it's becoming to the point where just really every business or organization, nonprofit type of thing, regardless of where you do business, you should have some form of consent management on your website. And like we all know about California and we all know about the EU and GDPR and Canada's and things like that. But what a lot of people don't know or realize is that there's laws in the books in Minnesota and Texas and Virginia and Oregon and elsewhere. And all of these laws vary from state to state. So it's important to understand that all of this stuff is changing. Without going into like gory details of what you need. I believe we have a webinar on this, and I know we certainly have blogs that are talk about all this stuff. I'm just going to cover like what's absolutely necessary on this. And first things first, you need to have some sort of notification on your website that essentially says, hey, we use cookies to make our site work. Just got to get that out there and put it in front of you. There are some laws that require that you include an opt-out button. There's other laws that don't require that. There's some laws that require you have specific language on that pop-up. Other laws. I think the most important way to protect yourself is to prevent cookies from tracking anything until the user provides consent. And that really is the biggest rule of thumb. You can follow all these rules, but some of the strictest rules are all about You can't track anything until the user does something to offer consent or no consent. And that's where a lot of folks get, or a lot of businesses get into a lot of troubles because they're not doing that sort of thing. The other important element of the privacy consent management privacy sort of tool is to give your users access to a preference center where cookies can be turned on or off. When you're going through all of this effort, cookies can be defined as essential or analytical, or I think performance based. There's some other ones out there too. And that you should be able to give the user a way to select those and select which cookies can run and which ones can't. And that puts all of the power back into the user's hand with relation to his or her privacy. And this tool is important, and I want to make sure that that is crystal clear. But another piece of this is the installation. And for any of this stuff that I'm talking about to work, you also need an expert who can essentially rewire how the tracking cookies work on your website, I think is the best way. So that, if some based on the user's selection, cookies are either firing or not based on that selection. And what we have seen is a lot of bad implementations where there's a tool and it shows, hey, we're tracking cookies, do you accept or not? But it doesn't do anything. It has no teeth to it at all. And that's bad. That's like really bad. And that is like one of the best ways to get a lawsuit filed against you if you're saying you're doing something when you're really not. So I'm dancing over at a very high level on this stuff. And there's a lot more to it than just these few things. But if I were to sum up this entire issue, an easy to understand way to walk away from this webinar, I would say that this is not something that is like a do-it-yourself sort of thing. I would say if you don't have any tools on your website now, go to your attorneys or your compliance teams, talk to them about how important they feel this would be for your website. And then once you have that answer, find a vendor who can then set up this properly so that everything is working correctly. So that is the type of consent privacy that is really important. Okay, I've covered a ton of stuff. I need a drink of water. And we've covered all this stuff and I haven't even gotten to where's everything going? So let's take a bit of a breather. Let's stretch. Let's, if you're sitting at your desk, get up, stretch, things like that. And let's have a little bit of fun. Let's take a poll. Who doesn't like polls, right? Been talking about a lot of things of, I've been dabbling, I should say, into what's coming down the pike in 2026. And I think unless you lived under a rock, you wouldn't, know. But I mean, the obvious answer is like the big thing is generative AI, right? It's everywhere. It's, going to solve the world's problems. It's going to take away our jobs. It's going to create a time machine and send robots back to the past to kill future leaders of the resistance and things like that. There's all these things. So the question I have for you, and that I'm really interested in learning, is a question that I ask a lot of folks, and that is, what is the value of AI to you? So you should have a little window in front of you. So the question is, what is the value of AI to you? Is it A, I rarely use AI, if at all. I barely dabble in it. Is it B, you know what? I'm starting to rely on AI a little bit, but it's really on the research side of things. I'm not getting too far beyond that. Is it C, which is like, hey, I started with research, but now this is becoming part of my routine. I'm starting to use it a lot. Is it D, where it's like I use AI for pretty much everything. It's ingrained into everything I do. Or is it E, you are questioning your existence if you're even a human and maybe you are just a robot that is sentient and you have no idea that you're actually that. So feel free to punch in your response to this and we'll take a look at the results. And it's not surprising. All right, C, letter C, AI is becoming more a part of my routine. That is not surprising. What I love about this question is I think it's going to be changing the more and more this becomes a thing, right? And so about 12 months ago, I was asking a ton of folks, oops, what their interest was in with AI, and a lot of the answers that I got were leaning more towards the letter A, where it's like, oh, see, it's there. I'm not really getting into it, but I'm just trying to look at it. But now the more and more that I talk to people, I'm finding that it really is letter C, where it's becoming more of a part of the routine. And that is something that's really interesting to hear. And letter D was the next up, which was pretty interesting too, where we're starting to incorporate that a lot into our daily routines, which is pretty interesting stuff. Regardless of how you answer, we all got to prepare for it because AI and WordPress are going to be intertwined very soon. And well, I should say it's already happening. So earlier I walked through some of the key things that WordPress is doing to stabilize itself, to just run more efficiently. They're essentially cleaning house and they're shoring up their foundation to embrace a future where are going to be required to run just massive amounts of data to function properly. And here is essentially the reason why. I realize I never took a drink during the poll. Our current understanding of websites is that there's a finite set of content and designs that we build out for our users. We spend countless hours researching, writing content, creating designs, and we're doing this all in this idea of trying to create something that speaks to everyone who might come across our website. But long story short, we just have a static website. What's happening? Or maybe what I should say, the problem with this approach is that even with that approach, even with all of the research that we're doing, all the things we're doing, we're really only reaching a select few people. And the reason why I can say that is like when you think about your marketing campaigns, oftentimes the great successes are measured in small percentages of return. Like we're extremely happy when we get an open rate of like 2% on an email or a click through or something like that, right? And we're really excited if we've got engagement on a web page that lasts longer than a minute or something like that. But imagine what would happen to your marketing campaigns if your websites could predict the content a user would see. And to take that a little bit further, imagine a website that changes and aligns the messaging in a way that will achieve the most engagement from a user as they get to it. That's the future that many are predicting with WordPress. All of this talk about improving Gutenberg is driving a lot of interest in the industry because the focus is on building these blocks of content that can be really easily changed and manipulated based on how the website is set up. And when you think of a website in those terms as these individual blocks, you can see how they could be moved around and manipulated based on the user's interest. This isn't something that's new. So, like many years ago, the big buzzword in digital marketing was all about personalization and making websites speak directly to users, right? But that movement really failed because it just required so much thinking and planning and developing, and that the return on the investment just wasn't viable. But if you fast forward to today, where we have generative AI that's becoming faster and smarter, we now have the computing power behind us to create these personalized experiences. And on top of that, with the power of generative AI imagery, there are those who believe that websites are going to be designed on the fly to respond to a user's preferences. So, for example, maybe you have an audience that loves pirates. Your website could change itself to include pirate themed imagery throughout it. And that's a way of selling your products and services. Kind of like a silly example, but like the idea is important to consider because there's just all sorts of statistics out there right now that suggest that personalized content and a personalized experience is more likely to convert a user into a customer than just a static one size fits all sort of implementation. So, my prediction for 2026 is going to be the advent of the generative website where digital marketers focus on building blocks of possible content. And those blocks train WordPress on what is important for the business or the organization. Then WordPress will take all of that and apply a real-time AI personalization. That's a long-winded term to create this dynamic user-centric platform that is generally analyzing and responding to like individual behaviors and preferences and a user's experience. It's going to create a conversational experience. That is another term that I've heard. It's this conversational experience where the site feels tailored to each visitor, and that boosts engagement and conversions. And that's where we're going. That's what based on what I can see and what I've learned. I don't think we'll get there by the end of 2026. I don't think we'll have a real time personalized sort of thing running, but the pieces are going to start appearing and it's going to be what's happening in the future. If this sounds a little too far fetched for you, here's a couple things to keep in mind. Many of the ads that you see online are generated by AI. Google has their Performance Max ads tool, which basically you add images and messages and keywords and stuff to a template. You let Google know who you want to reach and what you want them to do when you reach them. And then Google goes, all right, cool, I'll make some ads for you. And they create these ads that use user behaviors that hopefully convert them into going to your site. Every ad's a little different and it builds over time and it's all based on how users respond to the various designs and the messages it creates. Most of these ads, what you start to find is that after a few weeks or a few months based on the traffic volume, the conversions tend to greatly outperform manually created ads. If you still don't believe me on that, there are also website tools focusing on supporting the user experience through personalized content, and they already exist, and they're called chatbots. Before a chatbot was just you had a salesperson sitting on the other end, but that sort of mentality is going away. More and more chatbot tools are starting to utilize natural language processing to provide a better customer support, like on demand. It's like the immediate response. And the response to these tools have been overwhelmingly positive because they offer just that immediate response to queries. And every query helps build a stronger response in the future. And that's why it's become so popular. So my other big prediction is that I think we're going to start to see more and more chatbots implemented on new websites in the coming year or years. And I wouldn't be surprised if the idea of a search bar on a website would start to just fade off into obscurity because you have that conversational experience. Another area that is looking like the precursor to real-time website generation is within the development of better content and SEO tools. I got to be careful here because I I don't want anybody to walk away saying, "Oh, I'm going to use AI to rate my content." That's not what I'm saying at all. There is just a wealth of AI slop that is making the rounds because people are just following that. They're, "Oh, I'll just use AI to write it." And because of this process, I really believe that there's going to be a correction in the near future where all of this worthless content is just going to go away. What I am referring to are tools that are going to provide more support to you while you're working in WordPress. So these tools are just all about creating like them Get Genie and Rank Math. They have these tool sets already within them that allow you to just develop smarter optimization, keyword ideas, things like that that help you write the content. And it's really becoming bigger and bigger as the years progress. It's pretty interesting to see what they're doing. My bold prediction here is not that bold. The slop that we're seeing today is just, it's going to hit a wall at some point. Everyone's going to say, this is garbage. I need to move on. I really want to use real content on my website. And that's going to be the big change for 2026. But you'll be able to use tools that'll help you write better content with the use of AI. All right, I'm done prognosticating. That's the word. So let's summarize everything into a few quick hits here. First and foremost, I would say stick to the fundamentals with WordPress. Do your basic blocking and tackling. That's the type of stuff you need to do. Make sure you're running the routine updates to WordPress. Make sure you're updating your plugins, you're updating your themes, those sorts of things. Make sure your host is doing the scanning and all that stuff just to protect yourself. Make sure that you're following best practices with regards to like SEO and content development and all those sorts of things. That's really important. The other thing is protect yourself, clean up your website from all the bloat that you might have running it. Add a consent management tool or cookie consent tool to your website to protect you from the stupid lawsuits, and just work to make your website accessible for everyone. That's a really important part too. Another thing is embrace AI, but be vigilant. Don't just accept anything and everything that's marketed to you that says, hey, we got all this AI now. Just anything that's being promoted right now, take it with a grain of salt and allow it to build over time. And just have the mentality that AI is just not going to solve everything for you. It's an important tool, but all of the things that are being promoted with AI at the moment, there's a lot of promises and not a lot of things to back it up. And that's especially true with a lot of plugins and things like that. So just be smart and just verify everything before you start agreeing to promises that are being made to you. So I'll end with this. We're living in an exciting time with regards to the internet. That's exciting. It might be the only exciting thing right now. The potential for what's going to happen is just amazing. And what I would say is the smartest thing that you can do is just ride this tide and enjoy it as it happens and be smart about it. Apply due diligence to everything and just have fun with this because things are going to really change in the near future, which is going to be a lot of fun to do. All right. I have not been paying attention to questions or the chat. I'm sorry.
I have been.
Okay, good.
So
Thanks.
we're
So at
good.
least we have someone who's responsible here.
Well, I also have a question myself. Who responded, "I am a robot" to your poll? But we can get to
Oh,
that later. That's kind of cool.
I didn't even
Um,
notice that. Oh,
yeah, we got a couple of questions that came in during the webinar and a few that were
okay.
submitted ahead of time. So let me get to the ones that were posed here live. The
Okay.
first one is, what are your thoughts on Pantheon as a host?
That is a host I haven't used a ton or haven't worked with a ton. So at a very high level, I've heard it's decent, but I I don't have enough experience with Pantheon to really make a strong opinion of it. If you'd wanted to follow up and reach out to me and you and I can have a discussion about it, I'd be more than happy to look into it and provide some opinions on that just based on best practices.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. Next
Yep.
question also had a follow-up. How far away do you feel we are from where the predictive user behavior element using AI will be the norm or available for low-cost use?
That's an extremely difficult question to answer because I mean, it could happen tomorrow, depending on like an advancement in AI, right? It's one of those things where AI is going is such an open-ended area that it's hard to make some predictions. From just the basic settings and the things that I'm seeing, it's like we're still pretty far away from having that conversational sort of website where you go in and it's your own thing and that experience is strictly for you. We're still at least a year or two away from really achieving that, if you ask me. There's a lot of bits and pieces that are starting to come in that I think that we're going to start experiencing more and more as the year progresses. But I mean, who knows? Maybe tomorrow Google comes out with quantum computing and a new AI tool that completely destroys everything and shows you that you don't even need a website. Who knows? It's crazy, crazy
I
times.
think the other factor you got to consider too is that, Gen AI now coming out with browsers, right? And
Mm,
that's a very interesting dynamic. In fact, a few browsers have been launched recently where they've really been slammed
yes.
because some of the security and
Yep.
encroachment upon, people's personal information or what kind of content they're consuming. So I would say that the technology is probably here. Is it ready for prime time?
No, that's a good
No
point.
way.
That's a good
And so
point.
I think there's going to have to be a lot of, regulation and examination of that. The follow-up question to that was also, how will use of builders like Divi impact the ability of WordPress to do the AI customization?
Yes, that is an excellent question. So whoever asked that, very good question. So right now, you've got these page builder experiences that a lot of people love because you're doing display side editing. but it's all very structured. It's a very structured approach to how you do it. And the tools that these page builders are coming out with right now are not that great. I'm not going to lie. The Divi ones, the some of the other page builders, it's all about like focusing on like, oh, we can generate a new layout for you, and you get it, and it's just garbage. That's that's an interesting area that the page builders are going. What I think is going to happen is so you've got this divergent, right? Where Gutenberg is going one way with all of these blocks, and they're going to be using that. I think page builders are going to follow a similar path because some of the updates that I've seen from one of the page builders that we like to use, which is called Beaver Builder, was this essentially blank canvas type of approach where you're not building a row and you're not building a column or a module. You're just putting content in an area, and it's in a spatial type of thing rather than a very structured type of thing. That could be the future of where page builders go. I still think page builders are still going to have a very strong presence in the next year or two, but if they don't start making changes towards AI, I think that could be a huge way to get them out of the market pretty quickly. So good question. I like that one.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for your questions. We are out of time this morning. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to mention a few upcoming webinars. Please join us on Thursday, December 11th, as we present website design trends to watch in 2026. This is a very popular annual webinar that we give
It's a good one.
talking about upcoming trends. And as we kick off the new year on January 15th, we actually kick off the new year, excuse me, on January 15th with Digital Marketing 2026, staying ahead in the age of AI. So hopefully we'll be able to address some more questions around that. As always, all webinars are complimentary and begin at 10 a.m. Central Time. You can learn more and register at learn@northwoods.com. And if you're looking for information on a specific topic or just want to stay up to date on the latest trends and developments in the constantly changing world of digital, please check out our blog, our recorded webinars, our YouTube channel, and our Expanding Around the Campfire podcast, featuring casual conversations with our experts on all things digital. We encourage you to check that out. As I mentioned, we'll be sending out a link to the webinar here shortly, and you can pick up the URLs and the links within the deck. And lastly, if you'd like to learn more about Northwoods and the many services we offer, from website design and development to custom software and digital marketing to digital advertising and marketing strategy, visit us at nwsdigital.com to explore our services, details, read client stories, and much, much more. And after the webinar window closes, a short survey will be available, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could share your feedback on how we did this morning. So that concludes our webinar. I'd like to thank Matt and each of you for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. And until then, have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you very much.